I fitted keels for 11 years before the tide brought her to me, and I still remember the silence more than anything else. Tallow Reach doesn't go quiet. Not the gull cry, not the chain winches groaning against the pilings, not the fish criers hawking the pre-dawn catch before the boats even tie off. But that morning everything stopped at once, like the whole harbor had taken a breath and forgotten how to let it out. Then the water broke open. I'd heard the old-timers talk about the Vrindle the way you talk about weather you've never seen. A story passed down from a grandfather's grandfather, a shape that rose out of the deep channel once every long while and went back down again, leaving wrecked hulls and a silence that took months to shake. I hadn't believed it, not really. Not until the swell came up under the refugee skiffs anchored past the breakwater and one of them folded like wet paper. I was already running before I understood why. Half the dock was running. Somebody was shouting for the harbor bell. I remember the spray and the cold and the particular ugly sound a hull makes when it isn't a hull anymore, and I remember finding her wedged under a collapsed cargo net, small and gray-skinned and utterly silent, not crying, just watching me with eyes too large for her face like she was waiting to see what kind of thing I was going to be. I didn't think about it. I got the net off her and carried her up the ramp, and by the time the Reach's watch captain came around asking after survivors and manifests, I'd already decided, in the animal part of my mind that doesn't consult you first, that she wasn't going anywhere I wasn't going to. Her people were called the Osuven, and their whole world, whatever it had been, wasn't giving anyone answers. No manifest survived the wreck. No kin came forward. The watch captain looked at me for a long moment, the way men look at you when they're deciding whether to make your life difficult, and then he just said, "Keep good records," and walked off. I never did find out if that was permission. I took it as one anyway. I named her Aussie, because I couldn't get my mouth around the long, true name she offered me once, haltingly, in a voice like wind over a bottle's mouth, and because she didn't object when I tried it out loud, which in her, in those first months, counted as agreement. She didn't talk much that first year. She watched the market stalls the way sailors watch a coastline they don't trust yet. She flinched at the winches. She wouldn't eat unless I ate first, from the same plate, which told me things about where she'd come from that I never asked her to explain and she never volunteered. I gave her the run of my workshop instead of trying to force conversation out of her, showed her how a keel joint takes its stress, let her sit in the sawdust and watch me work, and somewhere in the second year she started humming while she watched, a low sound with no melody I recognized, and I stopped being able to imagine the shop without it. I gave her a bell once, a small brass one, ship scale, meant for signaling a skiff home through fog, nothing special. I'd made it myself out of scrap and I gave it to her the way you give a child something to hold on to, not because it does anything, but because a hand needs a thing in it sometimes more than it needs words. She kept it on a cord at her wrist for years. She rang it, softly, at the shop door every evening when the light went orange over the water, like she was calling something home. Though what, I never asked. She grew the way port children grow. Quick, watchful, capable, good with her hands like she'd been born to a trade even though her hands weren't shaped quite like mine. She learned the tides better than the harbor pilots, could read a coming swell off the color of the water 2 full days before the old-timers smelled it in the air. She learned which of the market criers could be trusted and which watered their catch, and she'd stand at my elbow at the fish stalls with her arms crossed like a dockmaster twice her years, daring anyone to shortchange us. There were nights she asked about her people in a roundabout way, never straight on, what a home might look like that wasn't a workshop, whether the deep channel remembered anything the way the old-timers said the Reach did. I never had good answers. I gave her honest ones instead, which she seemed to prefer. She never once asked me why I'd kept her, and I never once told her, because some things don't need saying between two people who already know them. There was a hard winter, her middle years with me, when a fever took half the lower Reach and I lost 3 days to it myself, sweating through the workshop cot while she sat up with cold cloths and the stubbornness of someone who had already decided I wasn't allowed to be the one who left first. I don't remember much of those days clean, but I remember her humming that same wordless tune low enough that I could feel it more than hear it, and waking to find the bell laid on the cot beside my hand, like she'd left it there for me to hold instead of her. She left the Reach the autumn she came of age in her own reckoning, not mine. Went inland to apprentice with a hullwright who did work I couldn't teach her. Work with the old bonded metal alloys that only a few yards still remembered how to shape. I told her I was proud. I meant it more than the words carried. She left the bell behind, coiled on its cord on my workbench, and I understood that as its own kind of promise, though I couldn't have told you to what. 9 years. Near enough. The old-timers had always said, between one rising and the next. I'd stopped counting. The Reach had rebuilt twice over, and the harbor bell that used to mean fire, now just meant a late boat coming in. So when the water went quiet again, on a gray dawn with the market stalls just lighting their lamps, I knew it before I understood I knew it. That same held breath, that same wrongness in the gull's silence, and I was old enough this time to be afraid instead of just moving. She was already on the dock when I got there. I hadn't sent for her. I hadn't known she was even back in the reach. She'd only arrived the night before, she told me later, drawn home by nothing she could explain better than a feeling in her chest like a held note. She was standing at the very end of the pier where the water goes black and deep, the bell, my bell, her bell, unwound from where she'd kept it all those years and held loose in one hand. I called her name. She didn't turn. The swell came up the way it had come up 11 years before, that same wrong smoothness in water that should have been chopped by wind, and I understood, with a cold drop in my stomach, that she meant to stand exactly where she was. I won't pretend I understood what passed between her and the thing that broke the surface that morning. A shape too large for the words I have, water sheeting off flank and old iron-dark hide, a sound that came up through the boards of the pier before it reached my ears. I won't pretend I understood the low, wordless answer she gave it, the same bottle-wind hum I used to hear from a child sitting in my sawdust, or why the huge shape stilled at the sound of her, turning one vast patient eye on a small woman standing her ground with a brass bell held out on an open palm. What I understood was simpler. I'd raised something that the wreck 11 years ago had tried to take from the world entirely, and the world had given it back, changed into exactly what was needed, on exactly the morning it was needed, and there wasn't a length of rope or a keel joint, or 11 years of trade work that explained that. Only love, worked patiently into a shape strong enough to hold. She rang the bell once, soft, the way she used to at the shop door at evening. The water went still. Whatever passed between them in that stillness was hers to carry, not mine to name. And the great shape sank back below the black water without another wave, without another board broken, like it had only ever wanted someone standing at the end of the pier who wasn't afraid to answer it. The reach didn't rebuild a third time. There was nothing left to rebuild. Aussie came back to my workshop that evening, salt wet and quiet, and sat in the sawdust the way she used to, and I made us both a plate of the same food, and neither of us spoke for a long while, because after 11 years and one terrible, gentle morning, there wasn't anything left that needed saying between two people who already knew.